Can you see now my presentation, guys?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So once again, good afternoon, everyone. And our first topic for probability and statistics, we have the module one, random variable and probability distribution. Our learning competencies for today, first, illustrate a random variable, whether this is a discrete or a continuous random variable. Distinguishes between a discrete and a continuous random variable. So what is the difference between discrete and continuous random variable? So later on you will know. Third, find the possible values of a random variable. Fourth, illustrate a probability distribution for a discrete random variable and its properties. And lastly, we're going to compute probabilities corresponding to a given random variable. Prior to our discussion a while ago, or prior to our discussion, I told you to at least look and scan your module and find the definitions of the following terms. We have the experiment, discrete random variable, sample space, random variable, continuous random variable, and probability distribution. Now, let's take a look at first experiment. What is experiment? Anyone from the class would like to give the definition of experiment? So, ano ibig sabihin ng experiment, guys? Based on your readings in your module, what is experiment? Anyone would like to volunteer?
Sir,
Name, please, Francine. Yes. What is experiment?
experiments are any movement or activity which can be done repeatedly under similar or comparative condition. One example of this is rolling a dice.
Okay. Very good. So when we talk about experiment, we're referring to a certain activity or a process that aims to generate data or gather results or outcomes. Now, the example na binigay ni Francine is rolling a die. Am I right, Francine? So that is an example of an experiment. Another example of experiment. Anyone? Take note, experiment is an activity
Sir,
or a process that aims to gain, gather data or outcomes. Who can give me another example of an experiment aside from what Francine mentioned?
Sir,
Yes, Emerald?
emerald po. Tossing a coin, sir.
Okay. Tossing a coin is an example of experiment. Very good. What else? How about the others? Ano pa yung experiment natin, whether or not related to statistics? But usually, halos lahat related yan. Okay, what else? Ano pa
Sir,
yung mga... Yes, Freddy.
an example of experiment is when you use test tubes and chemicals in the lab to complete a project and to try to better understand chemical reactions.
Okay. So when you conduct a certain, let's say, laboratory activities or yes, that aims or to determine a chemical reaction, that is example of experiment. Very good. And so on and so forth. So you have mentioned that tossing a coin uh, in relation to probability is an example of experiment. Okay, meron ng experiment sa science gaya ng sinabi ni Freddy. Now, yan yung isang example ng experiment. Pwede rin, let's say for example, when you draw a king or a queen in a deck of 52 cards. That is an example of an experiment. Another is when I put your names in a box, then I'm going to draw or pick one name that is still considered as an experiment. So experiment is an activity or process that generates data. An example of this is tossing a coin twice. Okay, aside from that, I asked you also to look for the definition of a sample space. So ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng sample space?
Sir.
Yes, who is that? Andreas? Yes, take it away.
Sample space is the set of all possible outcomes of an experiment.
Okay, very good. Exactly. So sample space is the set of all possible outcomes of an experiment. Meaning to say, okay, meron tayong experiment. Of course, when we conduct an experiment, there are possible outcomes, results, data. And these possible outcomes or results that we are talking about is what we call sample space. Okay, now let's consider the experiment that we have mentioned. Tossing a coin. Let's say when we toss a coin once. Now, what are the possible outcomes? Ano yung mga pwedeng lumabas pag tinos natin yung coin ng isang beses?
Tails or heads, sir?
Head or tail.
Okay, very good. So the possible outcomes can be a head or a tail, or head and tail. Those are possible outcomes. And these outcomes or possible outcomes are what we call sample space. Possible results, sample space. Why possible? Because it's not necessarily na yung head or tail lalabas silang pareho. Why? Because minsan mo lang naman itotos yung coin. So it's either head or tail. But still, yung head or tail, those are the possible outcomes. So not necessarily na when you perform an experiment, ito yung lalabas. Okay, not necessarily. So we are talking about results, outcomes, that is sample space. Now let's consider this experiment. When we toss a coin twice, dalawang beses tayong magtotos ng coin, ano yung mga pwedeng lumabas? What will be the outcomes or possible outcomes or sample space when you toss a coin twice? Okay, I'm going to give one. For example, nag-toss ako. For my first toss, ang lumabas ay head. Then the second toss, ang lumabas is still head. So, one of the possible outcomes or part of the sample space is two heads. Yan yung pwedeng lumabas, dalawang heads. So when you toss a coin twice, what are the other possible outcomes when you toss a coin twice?
Sir,
Anyone?
head,
Tail,
tail po.
Jerome?
Sir, head, tail po.
Okay, pwede rin. So it is also possible that your first toss is a head and then your second toss is a tail. That is a possible outcome. What else?
Sir, tail, head.
Okay, pwede rin na tail head. Okay, so yung first toss mo, tail, then yung second toss mo, ang lumabas ay head. That is also a possible outcome or part of the sample space. What else? How about the others?
Dalawang tails.
Yes, Jenny,
Tail.
Genevieve?
Sir, dalawang tails.
Okay, two
Sir,
tails.
tail and tail, sir.
Very good. Tail and tail or two tails. So your first toss is a tail, then the second toss, tail pa rin. Okay. Are there other possible outcomes if the experiment is when you toss a coin twice? Meron pa ba?
Sir, wala na po.
Wala na. And these possible outcomes, the totality of these possible outcomes, yun po yung tinatawag natin na sample space. In this case, if our experiment is tossing a coin twice, our sample space or possible outcomes will be two heads, head and tail and head, or two tails. Yan yung tinatawag natin na sample space. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Another definition that I asked you to look for the meaning or define is, but before that, another way to determine the sample space aside from just merely thinking kung ano yung mga possible outcomes, you can also use a tree diagram. Okay? For example, still, our experiment is tossing a coin twice. So, yung first toss natin, it's either head or tail. Now sa second toss natin, still either head or tail ang lalabas. Now to identify using a tree diagram, we can identify the sample space. So rather than iniisip mo lang. So in this case, tingnan natin yung pairing. So ang sample space natin, we have the head. For the first toss, possible that the second toss will also be head. So that is one of the possible outcomes. Another, if the first toss is head and the second toss is tail, so we have head and tail. First toss, tail. Second toss, we have a head. So that is also a possible outcome. And we also have tail and tail. So ang tawag dyan, guys, ay sample space. Possible outcomes. Now, what is random variable? Ano naman ibig sabihin ng random variable? Based on your reading. Anyone?
Sir.
Yes? Darlene, am I right? Is that Darlene?
Sir.
Okay.
Sir, random variable is a variable whose qualities are controlled by chance.
Okay. A random variable is a variable whose qualities is, come again, is,
Sir, are controlled by chance.
okay, are controlled by chance. Kaya random ang tawag kasi by chance tayo. Probability. Okay. Now, a random variable is a capacity that connects a real number. Take note. Connects a real number with every component in the sample space. It is a variable whose qualities are controlled by chance. Yun yung sinabi ni Darlene kanina. Kaya random variable. Like for example, if I'm going to put your names in a box, then I'm going to pick one. Random yon, walang bias. Okay, hindi ko pinili kung ano lang mabunot ko. Kaya random variable ang tawag doon. In this manner, a random variable is a numerical amount. Take note, numerical amount that is derived from the results of an arbitrary trial. Meaning to say, ang random variable, guys, is a numerical amount that can be derived from the results or from the sample space or possible outcomes. Now, para mas maintindihan natin ganito, experiment natin, tossing a coin twice. We have identified earlier the sample space when we toss a coin twice. We have two heads, head and tail in head, and two tails. Now, yung random variable na tinatawag natin, sabi dito, is a numerical amount that is derived from the results, which is, ano ba yung result? Yun yung sample space. Now, if we want to know the number of heads when tossing a coin twice, pwede, or that will be our random variable. So number of something like that. If we want naman na we want to know the number of tails appear when you toss a coin twice, pwede rin na yun yung random variable mo. Okay? So random variable is a numerical amount. Kaya makita nyo dito, number of unanas dyan. So random variable ang tawag doon. And it is usually represented by a capital letter X or any letter you want. But in this case, we will be using the letter X. So in this case, ang gusto natin, hanapin yung number of heads when we toss a coin twice, yun yung magiging random variable natin. Pero kung ayaw nyo naman, ang gusto nyo is you will consider the number of tails appear when you toss a coin twice, pwede rin na yun yung magiging random variable natin. Okay. Now, there are two types of random variables. Una is yung discrete random variables. Okay, will you read the definition of a discrete random variables?
Sir.
Okay, Jerome?
Discrete random variables are variables that can take on a finite number of distinct values. In easier definition, discrete random variable is a set of possible outcomes that is countable.
Okay, very good. So exactly, discrete random variables are random variables that can take on a finite or countably infinite number of distinct values. Meaning to say, pag sinabi natin discrete random variables, ito yung countable, binibilang, rather than mini-measure. So discrete random variable, example, number of girls in a class. So yung number of girls, binibilang natin, kinakount natin. So that is an example of a discrete random variable. Hindi naman natin mini-measure yung number of girls, di ba? Antay mo ibaga nga, there are 165 meters girls, kung kunate dyan. No. But rather, 165 girls in a class, something like that. So, it's more on counting rather than measuring them. So, yun yung halimbawa ng discrete random variables. Who can give me another example of a discrete random variable? Something that you are counting. Anyone?
So,
Yes, Freddy.
the number of eggs that a hen lays in a given day.
Okay. Yes, the number of eggs that a hen lays in a given day or particular day. That is an example of a discrete random variable, binibilang. What else?
Sir.
Yes, Emerald.
Sir, the number of heads acquired while flipping a coin 3 times.
Okay, so the number of heads acquired or appeared when you flip a coin 3 times, still binibilang mo yon. Discrete random variables, very good. What else?
Sir.
Who is that?
Sir, Orchids po.
Okay, Orchidas. Okay,
Sir,
will give me an example.
the number of boys in a family.
Okay, the number of boys in a family. So that is an example of a discrete random variables. Very good. So another examples of discrete random variables, we have number of heads obtained when tossing a coin toss, yung sinabi kanina, the number of siblings a person has. So ilan yung kapatid mo? So still, discrete random, binibilang natin yun guys. So the number of students present in a classroom or in an online class, so that is still considered as a discrete random variable. Anything that you can count rather than measuring them. So the number of crushes a person has. Okay. So discrete random variables ang tawag doon. Now going back sa example natin kanina, when you toss a coin, okay, meron tayong sample space. Eh ang random variable natin, number of heads when you toss a coin twice. Ano siya? Is it a discrete random variable? Is it a discrete random variable? Number of heads when you toss a coin twice?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Another type of a random variable is yung tinatawag natin na continuous random variable. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin nito? Anyone? Or will you read the definition of a continuous random variable? Volunteer? Will you read? Come on. What is continuous random variable? Nandyan. Kindly read the definition. Yes, Francine.
Continuous random variables, on the other hand, are random variables that take an infinitely uncountable number of possible values, typically measurable quantities.
Okay. So pag sinabi naman natin na continuous random variables, guys, ito yung random variables na mini-measure rather than merely counting them. Example, height of a person. Height is measurable. My unit. My unit. It can be in centimeters, meters, inches, feet, and so on. So example, or that is an example of a continuous random variable. Something that can be measured. Something that has a unit of measurement. Okay. Who can give me another example of a continuous random variable?
Sir, temperature.
Yes, Genevieve?
Sir, temperature po.
Very good. Temperature of a person. Ano yung unit na ginagamit natin dyan? Pwedeng Celsius, pwedeng Fahrenheit. Okay, another example of continuous random variable.
Sir,
Sir,
weight.
distance.
Sir, time.
Okay, distance. I heard also time. Very good. Those are examples of continuous random variable. We are not just simply counting them, but we are measuring them. Or my unit. Okay, examples. Okay, you mentioned the time. BMI also. Why? Because involve yung height and weight. The time a person takes for a person to take a bath, and so on and so forth. These are examples of continuous random variable. Okay? So I hope you can differentiate now a discrete random variable from a continuous random variable. Now, paano natin kinukuha yung values of random variable? Let's consider again the experiment. Tossing a coin twice. We have identified the sample space. Two heads, head and tail and head, and two tails. Our random variable, for instance, let's say we want to know the number of heads appear when tossing a coin twice. Yun yung random variable natin. Now, paano natin kinukuha yung values of random variable? Since ang random variable natin, guys, is yung number of heads when we toss a coin twice, ano or ilan or ano-ano yung pwedeng maging number of heads when we toss a coin twice? When we toss a coin twice, what are the possible number of heads appear? Take a look at the sample space. Can we have three heads when we toss a coin twice? Is it possible that we can have three heads?
Sir, no.
No.
No, sir.
So what are the possible values
No,
then?
sir.
Sir,
So what are the possible values then? Jonel.
sir.
One,
Jonel, one. Very good. One.
sir, one or two.
One or two. One or two. What else? When we toss a
Zero.
coin twice.
Sir,
Zero.
Zero. Very good. So 0, 1, and 2. So when we toss a coin twice, pwedeng walang lalabas na heads. Kasi pwede na ang lalabas ay two tails. When we toss a coin twice, pwede na ang lalabas ay isang head. And the rest is a tail. So pwedeng head-tail or tail-head. When we toss a coin twice, possible also that we will get two heads. Okay. So the values of this random variable x, which is the number of heads when you toss a coin twice, are 0, 1, and 2. Yun lang yung pwedeng maging bilang ng number of heads when you toss a coin twice. So those are the values of the random variable. We have 0, 1, and 2. So this means that when you toss a coin twice, the possible number of heads you will get can be 0, 1, and 2. Wala nang iba. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's how you get the values of a random variable.
Yes, sir.
Now, another term that we need to know is probability distribution. What is probability distribution? Anyone would like to share the definition of probability distribution based from what you have read prior to our discussion? So ano ang ibig sabihin ng probability distribution? Or will you read the definition of a probability distribution? Kindly read.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Andreas, please take it away.
The probability distribution of a discrete random variable x is a list of the possible values of x and the corresponding probabilities of the values. It specifies the probability associated with each possible value of the random variable.
Okay, very good. Let me just repeat. The probability distribution of a discrete random variable x is a list of the possible values of x and the corresponding probabilities of the values. It specifies the probability associated with each possible value of the random variable. Now, in a simpler definition of probability distribution, so when we talk about probability distribution, we just simply distribute the probability. Pinaliktad ko lang. Now, ano yung probability? When we talk about probability, ang possible values lang ng probability ay from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100. Okay. Now, when we distribute this probability, when we add those probabilities, dapat ang sum nila ay 1 or 100%. So yun yung probability. Again, ulitin ko, pag probability, ang possible values lang niya ay from 0 to 1. Hindi naman po pwede, for example, let's say your friend tells you, okay friend, I will support you in your game. I'll be there 150%. Is it possible that your friend will be there 150%? So, mayroon siyang kalahating katawan. So, 1.5 siya. So, hindi. That against the rule of statistics or probability. So, hindi man sasabihin na, okay, we will win the game 200%. No. Ang probability hanggang 0 to 1 lang or 0 to 100%. We don't have also a probability that is negative. Okay, there is a probability, there is a negative 0.50% probability that it will rain today. No, we don't have that. Okay, so probability distribution. Dinidistribute natin yung 1, yung probabilities. So, minsan pag distribute natin yung 1, pag inad natin, 1 din. Okay, probability distribution. Okay, para mas maintindihan natin, but before that, let me just show to you the properties of a discrete probability distribution. The probability of each value of the random variable must be between or equal to 0 and 1. So take note, probabilities can only be 0 to 1. Hindi pwedeng negative, hindi pwedeng more than 1. Number 2, the sum of all the probabilities of all values of the random variable must be equal to 1. Please take note of this. Pag may nakita kang probability distribution, pag inad mo yung probabilities niya, dapat 1 yan. Kung hindi yan 1, hindi yan probability distribution. Now, how are we going to construct a probability distribution, or how are we going to illustrate probability distribution? Now, let's consider the experiment again. Tossing a coin twice. Our sample space, 2 heads, head tail, tail head, 2 tails. Our random variable that we considered is the number of heads appear when you toss a coin twice. The values of random variable we have arrived a while ago are 0, 1, and 2. Take note that 0, 1, and 2 represents the number of heads when you toss a coin twice. Now, in our first column, as you can see on the table, nakalagay dyan random variable x. So we are going to write the values of the random variable here. So in this case, I'm going to write here 0, 1, and 2. I repeat, these values represent the number of heads. In our sample space, tingnan natin ang nasa taas. Ito. In our sample space, which of those possible outcomes will give you 0 head? 0
Sir, two
head.
tails po.
Okay, 2 tails. So I'm going to write here in our second column the sample space. Okay, 0 sa random variable natin, 0 head. So ano yung nasa sample space natin na 0 head? Of course, 2 tails. Another, what if our random variable x is, let's say, 1. There is 1 head. What are the possible outcomes in our sample space in which we will get 1 head? Will you
Sir, head
identify
tail
them?
po. Saka tail head.
Head, tail, and tail head, sir.
Okay, very good. So we have head, tail, and tail, head. How about when we get 2 heads? Ano yung nasa sample space natin?
Sir, 2 heads.
Sir, 2 heads.
Okay. Or head and head. Take note that in our sample space, ilan yung sample space natin? 4 lahat yan. Okay. Now, in our third column, mayroon tayong P of X doon. Ano ibig sabihin ng P of X? This represents the probability of the random variable X, which is the number of heads when we toss a coin twice. Now, 0 head. Out of 4, How many possible outcomes can we get from the sample space where there's no head when we toss a coin twice?
One
Ilan?
over 1/4, sir.
Okay, 1 out of 4. Very good. 1 out of 4. Yun yung probability na tinatawag natin. Meaning to say, okay, if I'm going to ask you, what is the probability of getting no head when you toss a coin twice? So 1 out of 4. 1/4 or 25% probability. Okay? Next, how about the probability of getting one head when you toss a coin twice?
2/4, sir.
Okay, 2/4. Ano yung 2? We have the head and tail and head. Or reduce that, it is 1/2 or 50%. Meaning say, there is 50% probability of getting one head when you toss a coin twice. Yun yung ibig sabihin nun. Next, how about the probability of getting two heads when you toss a coin twice? What's the probability of getting two heads when you toss a coin twice? Out of 4, Ilan?
Sir, 1/4.
Sir, 1 din po.
Okay, very good. It's 1/4. And in this
One over
case,
four, sir.
yes. And in this case, we have distributed already the probabilities. So, malalaman natin kung tama yung distribution natin if we're going to add these probabilities. So, 1/4 plus 1/2 plus 1/4, it will give you a sum of
1, sir.
1. And that is an example. The table that you can see in your screen is an example of a probability distribution. Ganyan yung proseso kung paano gumawa ng probability distribution. So again, take note, you can only determine if a given table is a probability distribution if the probabilities, when you add the probabilities, the sum is 1. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Now, para mas maintindihan natin or to know if you really understood our topic, we're going to answer the following questions. Okay? Let me just read the first question. Which of the following is not a discrete variable? O, dapat alam natin kung ano ibig sabihin ng discrete variable. Countable. Okay, but ang tanong dito, which of the following is not a discrete random variable? A, number of white marbles in the box. B, number of students present in the classroom. C, the weight of a box of soft drinks labeled 8 ounces. Letter D, the number of customers arrive in the restaurants between 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Which of the following is not a discrete variable?
Sir, letter C.
Sir,
Letter
C.
C, sir.
Very good. The answer is letter C. The rest kasi binibilang, number of students, number of white marbles, number of customers. But in letter C, the weight of a box, we are more on measuring. So the weight can be in ounces, can be in kilograms, grams, and so on. Very good. Number 2, which of the following statements describes a continuous random variable? A, the average distance traveled by a jeep in a week. B, the number of students present in a class auditorium. C, the number of motorcycles owned by a randomly selected household. Or D, the number of girls taller than 5 feet in a random sample of 10 girls. What's your answer?
Sir,
Sir,
A.
A. A, sir.
A.
It's letter A.
A.
The distance, the average distance, take note, may unit yan, mini-measure natin yan. It can be in kilometers, meters, and so on and so forth. Very good. Which of the following is a variable whose value is obtained by measuring? A, continuous. B, discrete. C, interval. D, normal. Nominal, I should say.
Sir, letter A.
Sir,
A po.
A, sir.
A, sir.
Okay,
Continuous,
very
sir.
good. Very good. Continuous. Another, you decide to collect a bunch of bottles of soft drink and, and measure the volume of soft drink in each bottle. Let X be the number of milliliter of soft drink in each bottle. What type of variable is X? A. X is a constant. X is a placeholder. X is a discrete random variable. X is a continuous random variable. What's your answer?
Sir
Sir,
D
D
po.
po.
D, sir.
D, sir.
Sir D.
Okay. X is a continuous random variable. Kasi yung X natin, number of milliliter kung natayo. So, more on measuring siya. Another, which of the following statements describes a discrete random variable? The length of a span of a 10-month-old baby. Letter B, the average increase in the height of a baby each year. Letter C, the average increase in weight of a baby each year. Or letter D, the number of avocados produced by an avocado tree each year.
Sir letter D po.
Sir, D po.
Sir D.
D, sir.
D, sir.
Okay, very good. The number of avocados produced by an avocado tree each year. So, discrete siya. Bakit? Binibilang lang. Hindi natin siya mini-measure. Another, X is the time it takes a chef to cook a specific dish is a continuous random variable. Why do you think the variable X in the statement becomes continuous? The variable X is continuous because it takes a range of values, B, takes a countable value, C, an integral value, or D, a specific numerical value. What do you think? What do you think is the answer for this question?
A, sir.
Sir,
A
Okay,
po.
a
A,
range
sir.
of values. Kasi continuous siya, hindi naman siya countable. Pag sinabing integral naman guys is parang whole number siya. Okay, ang continuous guys hindi lang siya whole number but it can take range of values between two values, let's say 2.6, 2.5, something like that. Okay, so letter A is the correct answer. Next question. If a coin is tossed, what are the possible values of the random variable for the number of heads? If a coin is tossed once, what are the possible values of the random variable for the number of heads? Pag tinos natin yung coin isang beses, ano yung possible number of heads na lalabas?
Sir,
Sir, A
Sir
po.
po.
A, sir.
A, sir.
Bless. Okay, it's letter A. Very good. 0 or 1 lang. Hindi naman pwede na dalawang heads yung lalabas in tossing a coin once. So the answer there is letter A. Very good. How about this one? Suppose you toss two coins. Oh, we answered this already. What are the sample spaces for the experiment above? What's your answer?
Sir,
Sir
letter
D.
D
Sir
po.
D.
D, sir.
Okay, letter D. Yan yung example natin kanina. Okay. Another, if you toss a die, which of the following is not a possible value of the random variable x representing the number of dots appeared at the top after tossing the die? A, 1, B, 7, C, 6, or D, 3?
Sir
Sir,
7.
D po.
Sir
B,
B.
sir.
B, sir.
B.
Okay, very good. It's letter B. Kasi wala naman tayong 7 dots in a die. So, it ranges from 1 to 6 only. Next, the following table shows the probability distribution of a discrete random variable x. Find the value of n. Take a look at the probability distribution given. So the following table shows the probability distribution of a discrete random variable. Find the value of n. What do you think is the answer?
Sir, C po.
Sir C po.
Sir,
C,
C.
sir.
Is it letter
0.5.
C? Are you sure?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Letter C. How about the others? What do you think is the answer? How did you get letter C? How did you get letter C?
Sir, 1 minus 0.40 plus 0.15 po.
1 minus 0.40, then 1 minus 0.15. Okay. Or what if we are talking about the total? By the way, in this case, hindi naman klaro yung question, di ba? Hindi naman na sinabi na yung n is or yung 6 is the total or the um what do you call this one? The probability. Okay. So siguro in this case we will consider two answers. Okay? So pwede na 0.45 or pwede rin na 0.55. Siguro mayroon lang typo dito. Okay, but basically pag tinitingnan natin 'yan, pwede rin yung tama rin yung sinabi ni Emerald na 'yon na the answer is 0.45. Why? Because 1 minus 0.40 then 0.15. But we will consider also yung 0.55 because n and 6 naman was not specified whether it is the total or part of the random variable or discrete random variable. Okay, so 0.45 or 0.55. Okay, next, let's consider the following question. Which of the following table represents probability distribution? So paano natin malalaman kung yung given table ay probability distribution?
Sir, kapag po yung sum is 1.
Pag yung, Jerome?
Yung sum po, yung
Okay, sum
probability,
ng,
sir.
okay, very good. Sum ng probability. Now, which of the following tables represents probability distribution? A,
C.
B, C, or D?
Sir, C
Sir,
po.
C.
C po.
Okay, let's see. The answer is letter C. Ano yung pinag-add natin dyan, guys? Ano yung pinag-add natin dyan?
Yung probability po, sir.
Okay, what are the probabilities given? We have
0.
0.32, 0.28.
0.28, 0.28, 0.12.
Okay, very good. So if we add that, take note yung property ng probability distribution natin, it should be or the sum should be 1. So the rest, when you add them, it's not 1. So the answer for this question is letter C. How about this one? What are the values of P of X if P of X is equal to X over 3 for X is equal to 0, 1, and 2? What are the values of P of X if P of X is equal to X over 3 for X is equal to 0, 1, and 2? So what's the probability?
A, sir.
Okay, it's letter A. So just simply substitute. So 0 over 3, okay, we know that that is 0. Yung x natin, if x is equal to 1, 1 over 3, it will give you 0.3333. So when we round that, that is 0.33. Another substitute, when x is equal to 2, so 2 over 3, that is 0.666 and so on. And when we round that to two decimal places, it will give you 0.67. Very good. How about this one? The given table represents a probability distribution. What is P of 2 and P of 3?
Sir, B.
B, sir.
Letter B, sir.
Okay, how did you get letter B?
Sir, pinag-plus.
Okay, we just simply add the probability. So 1 over 6 plus 1 over 6, it will give you 2 over 6. And when we reduce that to the lowest term, it will give you 1/3. Okay, last two questions. The daily demand for copies of a magazine at a variety store has the probability distribution as follows. So nakita yung table dyan, that is a probability distribution. Now, the question is, what is the probability that two or more, take note, two or more copies will be demanded on a particular day? So what are the number of copies na two or more? So what is the probability that two or more copies will be demanded on a particular day? What's your answer?
Sir, C
C,
po.
sir.
D po.
C. Let's see if your answer is correct. Okay, how did you get C? Ano yung pinag-add natin, guys?
Sir, yung two or more copies po.
Okay. Ito yung 2 or more. 2, 3, 4, 5. Kasama si 5, ha? So, ano yung probabilities nila? Ito. We just simply add them. 0.30 plus 0.16 plus 0.05 plus 0.14, then you will get 0.65. Is that clear? Okay. And for the last question, same given pa rin tayo, but this time the question is, what is the probability that the demand will be at least, take note, at least 1, but not more than 4? At least 1, but not more than 4. Ano yung number of copies? From?
1 to 4, sir.
Okay, 1 to 4. Kasi at least 1, but not greater than 4. So 1 to 4. What's the probability then?
A, sir.
A, sir.
A.
Okay, let's see. The answer is letter A. How did you get? Just simply, okay, get the sum of their probabilities. Okay. Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. So that is random variable and probability distribution. So nakita niyo yung proseso. We started from an experiment. Sa experiment na yon, okay, i-identify natin yung sample space. And sa sample space na yon, we are going to compute for the random variable or values of the random variable. Then we are going to construct the probability distribution. Okay, do you have questions?
None, sir.
None, sir.
Okay, if
And
you don't
sir,
have questions, thank you for listening. And the output that you need to submit next Friday, okay, Friday next week, the gauge part, okay, the gauge part of your module. In case there are still questions or clarifications, feel free to raise that in our GC for everyone's consumption. Okay, once again, thank you for listening, but do not leave yet. Allow me first to capture our attendance. Attendance. Okay, so thank you everyone. God bless us all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye and thank you, sir.
Goodbye,
Bye,
everyone.
bye,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.